Hi, I have a really cool project for you today. I've been playing around with making mini quilts, and I think I have a new quilting obsession. And it's so much fun, I wanted to share it with you. So if you look here, these are a bunch of mini quilts I've made. All kinds of different looking quilts, different stitching, different fabrics. The cool thing about this is that these are all prints. There's no piecing involved in this, so that's what's really fun, makes this fun and easy. So I'm going to show you how to do this. So to start off, you're going to pick your fabrics. You've got, just like a regular quilt, you got your top, your batting, and your backing. Now when I first came up with this project a while ago, I actually fused the backing with some fusible web to the batting. Now what that does is that it makes your quilt a little stiffer and a little straighter. And you'll see on these examples I did. They're a little bit stiffer and a little bit straighter. So if you want that, you certainly can do that. But you don't have to. I found in playing around with this that you can skip this part and it still turns out all right. It might be a little bit wonky, but it's not a big deal. So for your top, here's a little tip. If you're doing a fabric that maybe has a seam and you want to fussy cut it, use some painter's tape on your ruler to create like a fussy cut ruler, so that you can center your picture, you know, right where you're placing it. And I cut these, they're 3 1/4 wide, 4 1/4 long, but you can actually do whatever size you want. This just happened to be a good size to work with. So you're going to go ahead and layer these, and then you just quilt it however you want. Like this one, I would probably just quilt along the lines. You can use any kind of thread you want. You could play with decorative threads. You could use invisible thread. So then when you got it quilted, then we're going to do the binding. And I just want to show you here, you're going to do a zigzag stitch. And it's kind of a satin stitch, but not as tight as a regular satin stitch. So I've started zigzag stitching, and you want to leave thread tails, a good couple inches of thread tails on there to work with at the end. So you're going to zigzag around the edges of this quilt. And when you get to the corners, you're going to pivot. So I'm going to show you here, I'm right at the corner. I'm going to show you the corner. Now before I do that, I want to show you, this is what I've got my zigzag stitch set at. It's a 2.0 width, 0.5 length. You know, you can play around with that if you want to, but that's what I have mine set at. So I'm up close to the corner, and I'm going to hand crank this so that I can get it right where I want it. So I'm going to hand crank the last couple stitches, and what I want to do is I want that needle to end up on the right side of the stitch. I want it to be at the corner of the fabric. Okay, so I'm right at the corner of the fabric. Now I'm going to pivot. I'm going to hand crank again, and what I want is when this goes to the left side of the stitch, I want it to go into the stitches I already did. And there's a good reason for that, because when we go to trim this out, we don't want to end up cutting those threads. So it's just a little precaution to put the needle in the stitches to begin with. I'm going to hand crank one more time, make sure my needle's where I want it, next to the edge, and then I'm going to start stitching. And I'm just going to zoom right down this side. Now if you've got a little bit of area that's not quilted and it's poking up a little bit, use a stiletto, or here I'm using a seam ripper, and just hold that fabric down. So you just zoom on down the side. So I'm getting close to the last corner here. And I'm going to move that little thread out of the way. Try to. Doesn't want to. Okay, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. Now in this particular corner, I have stitching that's holding the corner down, which is really nice. It doesn't always work out that way. So I'm just going to go slow, get very close to the corner, then I'm going to hand crank again. 1 or 2 stitches, right, so I'm close to that corner, and stop with the needle on the right side at the corner. Again, I'm going to pivot. Hand crank again to get the needle into the previous stitches. Hand crank again, make sure the needle's next to the edge of the fabric, and then I'm going to keep sewing. Now when I get close to the end of the stitching, I'm going to make sure my first thread tails are out of the way. So I've got them pulled off to the side here, and I'm going to slow down a little bit because I want the stitching to meet up together, but I don't want to go over the stitching. So I'm going to slow down, and now I'm going to hand crank a couple times so that it meets up. And I'm going to stop once it's closed up. You don't have any gap in there. And then I'm going to take this out. You want some good thread tails on this side too. So there's your binding. It'll be the easiest binding you ever do. So now I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to take and pull these thread tails to the back. Just pull up that thread. My eyes don't work as good as they used to. It's a little bit harder. Just find that stitch, and then you pull the thread tail through. So you got that set done. Now this one. There we go. So there's the other one. So now you got 2 sets of thread tails. So now I'm going to trim off the ends, and I'm going to take a hand needle and I'm going to thread it on a hand needle. Now I'm going to take the needle and I'm going to slide that just under several stitches. Slide that right through there and pull. So that's one set of thread tails. Then I'm going to snip off the excess. Then I'm going to repeat this with the other set of thread tails. Trim that off. Thread that on the needle. And I'm going to go the opposite direction I already went, so you can kind of see right there that that's where I already put the other thread tail. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction just so it doesn't get bulky and get hard to get through. And I'm going to slide the needle under several stitches. And pull that through. Okay, so that's it. That's your binding. So now we're going to trim this out. Now, you don't want to trim this, have this trimmed before you start sewing. It's a lot harder to work on. So that's why we've left this on here the way it is and then stitched. So now what you want to do, I like to just kind of get these threads away from the edge because they're easier to cut. And I'm going to take these scissors and I'm going to start cutting. And what you want is you want to get close to the threads without cutting the threads. Now you have to be a little slow with this, and you have to be a little careful with it, that it's still easier than doing a regular binding, that's for sure. Okay, so if you happen to snip some threads, and it looks like I might have done that here, not a problem. There's an easy fix for that. You can use a dab of fray check, or you can use a glue stick. So I like to use a glue stick. I'll look for where I cut the threads, and I'll just put a dab of glue stick on there, and it's good. No problem. So here's one that's almost done trimming. I'll just trim that one out to show you. You want to try and be careful around those corners because of where the threads overlapped. That's probably the trickiest part to cut. But like I said, if you nick some threads, just use the fray check or the glue stick and you're fine. And there it is. Isn't this the cutest? That is so adorable. So let's look at these little quilts again. So let's talk about what I did here. So these are all prints, and several of them I free motion quilted. Like this one I free motion quilted around the hearts, and it kind of looks like a little applique quilt, so that's pretty cool. This one has the clamshell print, so I just quilted around the clamshell. So there's that one. This one I quilted in between the print. This one I quilted along the print. So you can use the print for your guide if you want to do quilting that way. I love the little scene ones. I've got this one here with the little bench, so I just quilted around the different parts of the scene. Now this one, I quilted along the lines, and it might look like it has decorative threads, but that's actually supposed to be invisible thread. But I like the little shimmer that it ended up having. So that's another thing, is you can play with decorative threads and have fun with this. This one I just quilted around parts of the motif. Here's another scene one that I just love. I just think this turned out so cute. And you can see, look at, compared to my hand, the size of that. It's just so cute. And I stitched around the parts of the picture. And like I said, some of these turned out a little wonky, and part of it is my machine does not like invisible thread. It doesn't, the tension doesn't play nice. But I actually like it for this because they're on this little clothesline, and it looks like how they would look if they were blowing in the breeze. Here's another one. I just stitched along the lines there. Same thing on this one. You can't even see the quilting on this one. I used black thread on the black lines to blend it in. And then the polka dots. I just stitched between the polka dots to quilt on that one. And then I just happened to have these little clothespins. You can get these at the craft store. They're available there. And use some ribbon. This is about a 1/4 inch ribbon. And put them on a ribbon. And then you got yourself a little miniature quilt clothesline. I think it's adorable. It's a lot of fun. It's easy to do. So look through your stash, see what little prints you have, and have fun with it. Talk to you later. Bye.